I'm going to start to do a new series of videos now. I'm trying to move away a little bit from the one album review. I want to try and attract more viewers, to be frank. And so I'm going to look at artists and go into a more sort of deeper dive into their careers on more than one album at a time, but not as in depth. I don't want it to be too long. And so you, if you are interested in that genre and maybe want to know a bit about the artist, you can get a flow to what they've been putting out, and more than one album. And to start this off, I'm going to look at a band that really surprisingly became a very much loved band of mine in my teenage life, around about the age of 15, 16. And so very influential in how my musical tastes developed. And the band in question are the SteveMiller Band. Now, I first came across the SteveMiller Band through their album, which I will talk about later. But just to describe, I was still at school, and so money was basically not available to me other than through my generous father. And my interest in music started to develop, and I convinced him of the merits of renting LP records. There were a couple of companies in England that did this, and you could pay a very small amount of money to rent them for a couple of weeks. And the albums were also available, second-hand of course, and the price reduced the more times they were rented out. So it was a convenient way. The albums were posted. Amazing to think about it now. And one of the early ones I rented was Sailor, the second SteveMiller album. I was particularly attracted by the cover. But that's where my initiation into this band occurred. And then I went on and bought their fifth album called Number 5. And now those two albums are going to be included in this dive, because I'm going to look at SteveMiller from the inception in 65, 66 to the first two albums being released in 1968, followed up by two more in 1969, and then finally in 1970 they released Number 5. The SteveMiller Band, an American rock band formed in 1966 in San Francisco, California, led by Steve Miller on guitar and lead vocals. And of course, many of you will know they had a string of hit singles in the mid to late 70s. Classic Rock Radio got hold of these, and they became on everybody's lips. But I'm going to go into the band before that. And so we're starting in 1965 in Chicago. Steve Miller moved to Chicago and started playing the blues with Barry Goldberg, a keyboardist. But he didn't stay for very long, and he then left the group and went to San Francisco. And there he formed the Steve Miller Blues Band, later to become the shortened Steve Miller Band. And they got a contract with Capitol EMI Records in 1967. And then at that time, the Steve Miller Band consisted of Miller on guitar, James Cook on bass, Lonnie Turner on bass, James Cook on guitar, and Tim Davis on drums. And they also had a man called Jim Peterman on Hammond organ. And later they were joined by Boss Skaggs. Well, after Skaggs joined them, they performed at two festivals in 1967. The first you probably won't be familiar with. It was called the Magic Mountain Festival. But then after that, they appeared at the famous Monterey Pop Festival in June 1967, where the audience were able to feast on the delights of Otis Redding, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix and The Who, to name a few. So, in 1968, in February, the SteveMiller Band went to England, and they went there to record their debut album, which was titled Children of the Future. The engineer and famous producer Glyn Johns was involved in the recording of this, as he was for the second album, Sailor, which was recorded in America. First of a two-part look at SteveMiller, I'm now going to have a little look in more detail at the debut album. It was called Children of the Future, and it was very much an album torn between two worlds. On the A side, we got peaceful psychedelic music where everybody lived in spaced out harmony, but on the other was the rough, pissed off world of blues, which was part of Steve Miller's heritage. And I'm going to go through some of the tracks, not all of them, otherwise we'll be here all day. But on the first side, which was the Spacey Psychedelia track, the highlight really, after opening up with the title track, there's a ferocious cacophony of sound before it slides into spacey consciousness and getting high with the keyboards mixing with the guitars and vocals. The highlight was In My First Mind, which was a 7.5-minute effort in the middle, and here the psychedelic keyboards just built them a hypnotic mood to your senses, with Miller's vocals full of spacious echo. And it's certainly a dreamy sequence, and one can only speculate on how good this would have sounded with the additions of possibly marijuana or maybe LSD. Okay, so that first side is notable for having all the songs interwoven together, so it can be construed really as a long jam session. When we flip it over, the second side is much more of a blues note, and of course that's where Miller's roots are from. And the opener, written by Skaggs actually, and he's on vocals, Baby's Calling Me Home, I consider to be my favourite. It's got great acoustic and a great hook, and there's a touch of what I heard on harpsichord, although I can't see any credit for that. And then some fairly standard blues songs, but I'm going to chip forward to the penultimate song now, Fanny May. This is a song, a cover of a Buster Brown song, and he was a harmonica player and a blues R&B singer, and back in the 40s, I think. And there's tremendous harmonica from Miller on this, and you certainly get to nod along to it, and I really like it. And then the final track is the infamous Key to the Highway, Big Bill Broomsey's slow blues, which was written back in the 30s. Bill Broomsey, of course, infamous in blues circles. And this rendition by Miller is superb, and he again hits the high spots on guitar and on harmonica. And so that's a very short 35 minutes debut album, which I've grown to love. Possibly, if I get enough time, slot maybe a couple of lyrics slides for that album, but I'm not going to do all the songs like I've done with my individual album reviews. But let's move on now. Later that year, as I say, in October, back in the States. The second album appeared called Sailor, and it was released in October, and it was again produced by Glyn Johns, but it was recorded in Los Angeles. And it was the last SteveMiller band actually to feature contributions by Skaggs and Jim Peterman. Skaggs went on to start a successful solo career. And this album, though, features a lot more of the psychedelic blues sounds, a number of standards, and what I would describe as more harmonic style vocal songs. Ballads is probably not an apt description, but it was certainly a change and development from the first album. Let's have a quick dip into this album. This is an album that I dearly love, and the opening salvo, Song for Our Ancestors, was a song that completely gripped me from the off. It starts off with the noise from ship horns, possibly in some harbour, and it sort of lulls you into a dreamy organ sequence from Peterman that unravels before your ears, before the guitar is added to allow you to drift with that guitar keyboard mix. It's absolutely stunning. It's an instrumental, and it's difficult to actually feel it through words, but slow and hazy was what one critic described, and there's an absolutely great drum outro as well. So after getting put into that sort of mood, the following song, Dear Mary, is another that I really love. It's got horn-flecked drapes over a lullaby-style vocal by Miller. A ballady piano is prevalent, and the rain effects to this beautiful love song. The horns spring up and remind one of Sergeant Pepper, and there's a delightful guitar at the outro. Trying desperately to avoid doing all the tracks. The next track I'd like to comment on is Living in the USA. This is an American rock blues with Miller on harmonica, very much a crowd favourite at his live shows, and it really is rock on with great organ pumping towards the outro, and then we hear this racetrack noise, very creative, supposed to represent how the American male spends their leisure time, I guess. Next, the opener on side 2, Quicksilver Girl. Well, this I felt was heavily influenced by the Beach Boys. The harmonies dominate this. It's got California fingerprints all over it, and there's a nice spacey echo guitar as well. Absolutely love it. And moving on, Lucky Man, a Peterman song. It's got a nice acoustic guitar intro, and the piano drives the rhythm. And then the following track, I really love this, Gangster of Love, which is a very short version of the Johnny Guitar Watson song. A cute blues cover, it has to be said, with a lot of humour slotted in above the new music. And then You're So Fine, another cover by Jimmy Reed. And again, Miller shows his abilities on harmonica with this classic blues song written by Reed. And the guitar is once again a highlight. Anyway, that concludes this first part of my SteveMiller Band dive into their early career. And I will get this edited And I will be doing another one which features the two albums from 1969, which are also classics, and the album in 1970, number 5.